Hello.
My wife looked me dead in the eye and told me straight up that I just didn't fit into her high-flying lifestyle anymore. She actually admitted that there are times she feels completely embarrassed to even introduce me to people. All I could say back to her was, well, that's real good to know. Fast forward to that weekend, and she was hosting this massive family get-together. But the second her dad looked over and asked me to clear up something she'd been lying about for months, she froze up so bad her fork slipped right out of her hand and clattered onto her plate. Look, my name's Daniel, I'm 35 years old, and just 4 days ago, my wife basically told me I was a total stain on her social standing. What she didn't realize was that I'd already unraveled this massive web of lies she'd been spinning to her family about our bank accounts, and I was fully prepared to lay it all out there in front of the exact people she was desperately trying to impress. Melissa and I have been married for 6 years now. We first crossed paths when we were both 29, jumped into marriage pretty quick, maybe a little too quick if I'm being honest, and settled into what I genuinely thought was a pretty good life together. She's in pharmaceutical sales, pulls in a really solid paycheck, and is always jetting off to different conferences. As for me, I'm a public librarian. I absolutely love what I do, love being out there in the community, and just love helping people get a hold of books and whatever resources they need. Now, the pay isn't anything to write home about, but it's steady, dependable, and it actually means something to me. Melissa's family comes from serious money, not like tech billionaire status, but they are incredibly well off. Her dad runs a whole chain of dental practices, and her mom comes from a long line of old family wealth. They've always been perfectly polite whenever I'm around, but you could always feel this quiet undertone of disappointment, like they were constantly letting it be known that Melissa should have hitched her wagon to a doctor, a lawyer, or someone who fit into their high-class circles a bit better. Then, about 8 months back, Melissa started acting completely different toward me. She began making these passive-aggressive digs about my job, the way I dressed, and even what I drove. She'd say stuff like, "Don't you ever want more out of life than this? Aren't you a little humiliated driving around in a 15-year-old Honda? All my coworkers' husbands have actual, real careers." I tried my best to just shrug it off, thinking she was just stressed out from her own job, but the comments just kept getting nastier and nastier. Then, last Tuesday night, we were both getting ready to turn in for the evening. She was sitting on the edge of the bed scrolling through Instagram, checking out pictures from some fancy work function she'd just gone to, while I was just sitting there reading my book. Completely out of nowhere, she looked up and said, "You know what? I think I just need to be completely honest with you." I set my book down on the nightstand and said, "All right, go ahead." She looked at me and said, "You just don't match up with my lifestyle anymore. I'm out at these events with seriously successful, high-achieving people, and whenever they ask what my husband does, I have to stand there and explain that you work at a public library. Do you have any idea how that makes me look? Feels like I settled for less." I looked at her, kind of thrown off, and said, "Wow, I didn't realize my profession was something you felt the need to make excuses for." She just shook her head and said, "It's not just the job, Daniel. It's the whole package. Look at your clothes, they're all from Target. You're driving a car that rolled off the lot back in 2009. You have zero interest in networking or moving up in the world. There are times I am genuinely embarrassed to introduce you to anyone." I just sat there staring at her, completely stunned. "Embarrassed?" I asked. She sighed and said, "Yes, and I'm sorry, but someone had to finally come out and say it. My parents are constantly asking why we haven't upgraded to a bigger house yet. They want to know why we aren't taking luxury vacations to Europe every year like they do. What am I even supposed to tell them? That my husband is totally fine just being a librarian for the rest of his life?" I looked right at her and said, "Well, you could easily tell them that I'm happy doing work that actually matters. You could tell them that I fully pull my own weight around here and contribute to this household. Honestly, you could tell them a whole lot of things, but my guess is you haven't been telling them the absolute truth about any of it." She instantly looked away from me and snapped, "What is that supposed to mean?" I just leveled with her and said, "It means I'm really starting to wonder what kind of stories you've actually been feeding them about how we live." She just muttered, "I tell them we're doing fine." And that was that. She went to sleep completely furious, but I just laid there awake for hours, turning it all over in my mind. Something about the way she snapped back at me felt completely off. She got incredibly defensive, and it felt exactly like I'd accidentally hit a major nerve. The very next morning, which was Wednesday, Melissa packed up early and left for a business trip, and she wasn't scheduled to get back until Friday. Once she was out the door and gone, I ended up doing something I'd never once done in our entire marriage. I jumped online and logged into our joint bank account to take a hard look at the actual statements. Up until then, we'd always kept our money pretty separate, just splitting up the household bills based on what each of us brought home. But we did keep this one shared account to handle our regular living expenses. When I opened up the history, what I saw made my stomach completely drop. Over the last 8 months, Melissa had been pulling massive sums of money right out of her personal account, dumping it into our joint account, and then instantly shuffling it into some completely different account that I'd never seen before in my life. We are talking thousands of dollars, done over and over again. On top of that, there were these huge cash withdrawals, anywhere from $500 to $800 a pop, and she'd always write down little memos like home repairs or new furniture. Stuff we hadn't spent a single dime on. I called up the bank right then and there. Once I went through the whole process of proving who I was, the representative on the line confirmed that this mystery secondary account was solely in Melissa's name. They couldn't give me any specifics since I wasn't on the account, but they could at least tell me that it was active and real. I spent the rest of Wednesday and the whole day Thursday digging as deep as I possibly could. I went through every single credit card statement I could get my hands on. Turns out, Melissa had been going absolutely wild spending money on high-end clothes, expensive jewelry, and fancy dinners at top-tier restaurants. Places she'd never once taken me to. I even started looking through her office desk at home and found receipts hidden in a drawer for a designer purse that cost $3,000, shoes that ran $800, and monthly spa and salon appointments that added up to hundreds and hundreds of dollars. Then I stumbled onto the real kicker. It was a folder tucked away in her desk that she'd labeled financial planning. Inside that folder were printed out spreadsheets detailing our supposed combined income and total assets, except every single number on those pages was completely made up out of thin air. What do you think about this whole situation? Because she had gone ahead and created these official-looking documents claiming that I was pulling in $95,000 a year instead of my actual $52,000 salary. She wrote down that we had $180,000 sitting in savings, when the reality was we only had about $23,000 across all our accounts. And to top it all off, she even listed out investment properties that we absolutely did not own. Right at the bottom of one of those pages, written in her own handwriting, it said, "For Mom and Dad's review." It hit me right then. She had been spinning this massive web of lies to her parents about how we were doing financially, making us out to be way wealthier than we actually were. And based on that jacked-up income she gave me, she'd been inflating my salary just to make it look like I wasn't the total letdown she secretly thought I was. When Friday evening rolled around, Melissa finally got back from her business trip. I didn't let on about a single thing I'd uncovered. I stayed completely calm, almost eerily quiet, honestly. She asked me what I'd been up to while she was gone, and I just told her, "Not much." She looked visibly relieved that I wasn't trying to rehash Tuesday night's blowout argument. The next morning, Saturday, she reminded me that her whole family was coming over to our place for dinner that night. Her parents, her brother and his wife, plus her aunt and uncle. This was one of those big family get-togethers she'd been stressing over and planning for weeks. She looked at me and said, "Please try to make a good impression tonight. Put on that nice shirt I bought you and honestly, maybe just let me do most of the talking." I just shrugged and said, "Sure, whatever you want." I spent the whole afternoon helping her get everything ready, setting the table and fixing up flowers, all while sitting on this massive secret, knowing exactly what was about to go down. Around 5 p.m., the family started rolling in. Her dad, Tom, her mom, Patricia, her brother, Mark with his wife, Jennifer, and her Aunt Susan and Uncle Robert. At first, everyone was just being polite and making small talk. Patricia complimented our place and asked how things were going. Tom started talking about golf, and Mark was busy bragging about his latest big promotion. It was your typical run-of-the-mill family gathering, except I could practically feel the tension radiating off Melissa. She kept shooting these nervous glances my way, terrified I was going to say or do something to embarrass her. We all sat down at the table around 6:30, and Melissa served up her signature roasted chicken. The wine was flowing, and the conversation was going smooth. Then, about halfway through the meal, Tom turned right to me and said, "Daniel, Melissa mentioned you've been doing some consulting work on the side lately. How's that whole thing going for you?" I locked eyes with Melissa, and the second I did, her fork stopped dead in midair. I looked back at Tom and asked, "Consulting work?" He nodded and said, "Yeah, the library consulting. She told us you've been advising other libraries on how to set up their digital systems, and she said it's been pretty lucrative." I watched the color completely drain from Melissa's face. She jumped in real quick and said, "Dad, maybe we shouldn't be talking about work stuff at the dinner table." But Tom just kept right on going. "I'm just curious, that's all. Melissa showed us some projections last month regarding your combined income, and I gotta say, it was pretty impressive. She mentioned you were pulling in almost 6 figures between your base salary and the consulting gigs. That's fantastic. We were a little worried about the library career at first, but it really sounds like you've built something solid." The entire table went dead silent, and suddenly every single eye in the room was fixed on me. Melissa's hand was shaking so bad she could barely pick up her wine glass. I just sat there, took a breath and said completely calmly, "I don't do any consulting. I work at the public library and that is it. I make $52,000 a year. There is no side work, and there are no consulting contracts. Just my regular librarian paycheck." Patricia looked totally bewildered, but before anyone could speak, I said, "Melissa has been lying to you." I pulled out my phone and pulled up the photos I'd taken of those bogus financial papers. She went ahead and created fake spreadsheets claiming that I make $95,000 a year. She's been inflating our income, making up assets out of thin air that we don't even own, and painting a completely fabricated picture of our finances. Right then, Melissa's fork slipped right out of her hand and clattered loudly onto her plate. She gasped, "Daniel, what on earth are you doing?" I looked right at her and said, "I'm telling your family the actual truth, because apparently you're so humiliated by the reality of being married to a librarian that you had to invent a better version of me just to show off to them." Tom reached across the table for my phone, and I handed it right over. He started scrolling through the photos, the fake spreadsheets, the real bank statements showing our actual modest savings, and the stack of receipts from Melissa's wild spending sprees. Patricia looked at her daughter and asked very quietly, "Melissa, what is the meaning of this?" Melissa started stammering, "It's not. I can explain." Mark piped up and said, "Well, please do, because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've been flat out lying to all of us about your money for months." By this point, Melissa was in absolute tears. She sobbed, "I just wanted you guys to see that I hadn't made a huge mistake by marrying him. All of you always had opinions about Daniel not being successful enough or not making enough money, and I just desperately wanted to prove to you that we were doing great, that I'd made the right choice." Tom's voice went incredibly hard as he asked, "By lying? By creating fraudulent documents and totally misrepresenting what your husband makes?" Melissa just wept and said, "I was embarrassed. Everybody else in this family is highly successful and wealthy, and I'm the one married to a librarian who drives a 2009 Honda and wears clothes from Target. Do you know how that feels? So you lied to us," Patricia said, "and you've been spending. How much have you been spending, Melissa?" I pulled up the credit card statement on my phone. About $4,000 a month on luxury items, designer clothes, expensive dinners, spa treatments, all while telling me I was an embarrassment for not being wealthier. The table erupted, Tom demanding to see more proof, Patricia asking why Melissa would do this, Mark saying he couldn't believe his sister would lie to the family. Jennifer just sat there looking shocked. Susan and Robert exchanged uncomfortable glances. Melissa stood up abruptly. "I'm not going to sit here and be attacked." "Sit down," Tom said firmly. "We're not done talking about this. You've all judged Daniel from day one. Maybe if you just accepted him instead of always asking about his career and our finances, I wouldn't have felt like I needed to lie." "That's not fair," Patricia said. We've always been polite to Daniel. If you felt pressure, that's something you should have addressed with us, not by creating an elaborate fiction. And certainly not by stealing from joint accounts, I added quietly. Everyone turned to look at me. She's been transferring money from our joint household account to a private account, I explained. Thousands of dollars over the past 8 months. Money that was supposed to go toward bills and savings. Tom stood up. Melissa, is this true? She was fully sobbing now. I needed money for things, for clothes and appearances. You don't understand the pressure of maintaining an image. Whose image? Mark interrupted. Nobody asked you to maintain any image. You created this pressure yourself. The dinner ended shortly after that. Melissa locked herself in our bedroom. Her family left, but Tom pulled me aside first. Daniel, I owe you an apology. We never meant to make you feel inadequate. And I'm ashamed that my daughter felt she needed to lie about your income. That reflects poorly on how we raised her. I appreciate that. What are you going to do? About the marriage? I honestly don't know yet, but I'm not going to keep being treated like an embarrassment. After everyone left, I slept in the guest room. Melissa tried to talk to me through the door around midnight, but I didn't respond. Sunday morning, she came out looking exhausted. We need to talk. Okay, I'm sorry for all of it, for lying to my family, for spending the money, for making you feel like you weren't enough. Do you actually think I'm not enough? Or do you just think your family thinks that? She hesitated. I don't know anymore. Maybe both. I got so caught up in trying to prove something that I lost track of what actually mattered. Which is, I don't know, Daniel. I really don't know. The following week was tense. Melissa's mother called several times, wanting to talk to her about the financial deception. Her father apparently insisted that Melissa see a therapist to address what he called compulsive lying and status anxiety. Tom also called me directly on Tuesday. Daniel, I talked to a lawyer friend. If Melissa has been taking money from joint accounts without your knowledge for personal use, that could be considered financial misconduct. You'd have grounds for divorce if you wanted to pursue it. I'm not there yet, but thank you. I mean it when I say we never intended to make you feel less than. You're a good man. You contribute to society in meaningful ways. If Melissa can't see that, the problem is with her, not you. Thursday evening, Melissa came home with brochures for couples counseling. I made some calls. I found 3 therapists who specialize in financial stress and communication. Will you at least try this with me? Why? So you can learn how to be less embarrassed by me? So I can learn why I felt I needed to impress people more than I needed to be honest with my husband. That answer surprised me enough that I agreed to try one session. The first therapy session was rough. The therapist, Dr. Marian, asked direct questions about our relationship dynamic. Melissa admitted she'd felt pressure from her family to maintain a certain lifestyle, but also admitted that much of that pressure was self-imposed. They never told me I married wrong, she said, but I saw my brother with his lawyer wife, my cousins with their doctor husbands, and I felt like I was the disappointment, the one who married the librarian. Why is librarian an insult to you? Dr. Marian asked. It's not an insult. It's just not impressive. To whom? To people who matter. Like? Melissa couldn't answer. Over the next few weeks, more came out. Melissa had been dealing with anxiety about her career, worried that she'd peaked and wouldn't advance further. She'd been comparing herself constantly to colleagues and family members. The expensive purchases were her way of feeling successful, of looking the part even if she didn't feel it internally. But why lie about Daniel's income specifically? Dr. Marian asked during our third session. Because if he was successful too, then our life together looked like a success. If he was just a librarian making $52,000, then what did that say about my choices? It said you married someone you loved who does meaningful work, I interjected. But apparently that wasn't enough for you. We're still in therapy. Melissa has agreed to full financial transparency, shared access to all accounts, detailed budgeting, monthly reviews. She's also started therapy individually to address the underlying anxiety and image issues. Her family has been supportive, but distant. Patricia told Melissa she was disappointed by the deception and needed time. Tom checks in with me regularly, which is oddly touching. It's been 3 months since that dinner party. Melissa and I are still together, still in therapy, still working through things. I'm not sure if we'll make it long-term. Some days are better than others. She's cut her spending dramatically. No more designer purchases. No more expensive dinners she can't afford. She sold some of the items she bought during her spending spree and returned the money to our joint account. The biggest change is that she's been honest with her family. She told them the real numbers, apologized for the deception, and asked them to stop asking about our finances altogether. Tom actually respected that, said it was none of their business anyway. Melissa still struggles with feeling less than sometimes. She'll see posts on social media from colleagues or family members and spiral a bit. But she's learning to catch herself, to question why external validation matters so much to her. As for me, I've learned that I can't fix someone else's insecurity about my worth. I can show up, do my work, contribute to our life together. But if that's not enough for her, if she needs me to be something different to feel proud, then this marriage isn't going to survive. I'm Daniel, 35, librarian, husband to a woman who once said I was an embarrassment. We're trying to rebuild from that. Some days I think we can. Some days, I'm not sure why I'm trying. But I know this. I will never again let someone make me feel inadequate for doing work I love, for living within my means, for being exactly who I am. If that's not enough for Melissa, then she was never enough for me either. A lot of people are asking why I'm staying. Honest answer, I don't know if I am long-term. We're trying therapy and seeing if the person she's becoming through this process is someone I can trust and respect again. If not, I'll leave. But I wanted to at least try before walking away from 6 years. Yes, I talked to a lawyer early on to understand my options. I have documentation of everything in case I need it. I'm not naive about protecting myself. The library job is great, actually. I got a small promotion last month and I'm working on a digital literacy program for seniors in our community. It's rewarding work and I'm proud of it. Anyone who thinks that's not enough can find someone else to impress. This story really makes you think, why is it that in today's world, doing work you love, honest labor, and peace of mind have come to mean less than luxury brands and social media status? What do you think? Is Daniel right to give this marriage a second chance? Or is there simply no turning back after being told you're an embarrassment?
Bye bye.